2020 Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Would we please have a roll call?
Yes. Do I need to do anything else?
Patricia,
Here.
Alyssa,
Alyssa's absent.
Brandon,
Here.
Brenda's absent.
Matt,
Here.
Melissa,
Here.
Natasha.
Here.
Okay, I am looking for approval of the meeting minutes from August 17th, 2022.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm just looking for someone to make a
I
motion.
wasn't here.
I don't see, so I'll move. We approved the meeting minutes from our last meeting.
Is there a second?
I can second.
Okay. Any comments or questions about the meeting minutes? Additions or alterations? All those in favor of approval of the meeting minutes, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, say no. The minutes are approved. Wow, that was easy. Okay, so we now have, what do we got going on here? Update. I'm sorry, any public comments? Okay. Discussion items, update on park projects.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we're kind of wrapping up, I guess, the traditional park season. Summer playgrounds are in. Brandon's, we're finishing hopefully the last of the mulch at this point. So we didn't want to pay a partial load charge. So next week, the vendor is coming up to finish the schools, and so he's going to bring the rest to finish that one. But it's usable, I guess, but we want to finish it, yeah. So to fill it up. But everything else is online. Glen Park turned out really well. We have that Horn Place surface that looks really good. Knollwoods turned out really well. I'm just working on getting that established, and it's pretty cool. That one's good. So right now, Cindy, there's a new vendor from New Recreation. So Cindy, I think, was out recently to meet with and some of our staff. So we're getting estimates for some of next year's projects, which again are generally ARPA funded, and they think one that's city funded. But again, looking at Collins, Westdale, a little bit more work at Glen, probably more of a sun shelter type thing for the pool deck. And I'm forgetting one, but we'll have some information on that and some estimates. And so we'll plan that over the summer, or excuse me, winter, and something in. And then Sterling Ponds, we've gotten the backstop installed, soccer nets installed, and the berm plantings and prairie plantings have been done all within the last couple of weeks. So things are really looking good out at Sterling Ponds. And that's actually what the other
the addition to that.
Yeah, that's the other playground project for next year. So,
Now, they had commented that 4 acres that was up for grabs was never mowed, or do we mow that? Or do we not?
yeah,
We do mow it.
we
Okay.
did mow it, and the moment we did, it drew attention, like, what are they doing to that? And it was just a mowing.
Okay.
But we are going to mow some kind of like trails through it, just to kind of create a little meandering trail and kind of connection to the berm. So we'll do that this fall. So we won't, mow the whole thing again. We'll just mow kind of a trails through it.
Sure.
And do that, and then kind of let it establish. And then next summer, we'll probably do a mowing, but then again, kind of a trail through it.
Because I know out at DeSanctis Park, that we have that whole patch that goes wild, and that's kind of nice to walk around and see what happens with that property.
Yeah, in that case, the trail kind of encases that. Sterling Ponds, we don't quite have that, so we wanted to create some connection to the berm. So we thought we'll just cut a trail through there for it. So,
Great.
so that'll be nice. Yeah, so the project's pool and splash pad closed up recently, splash pad more recently. So we're working on getting those winterized. But good season.
Any of you guys have questions for me? Questions or comments?
How often do you mow the lower Glen Park? Because there's some
sometimes
point,
once a year.
there's some points this year that meadow along the river and those benches was pretty bad.
Yeah,
What?
if you-
Lower Glen Park along the river.
Kenny.
Yeah, if you look at Western, we'll do some select, but twice a year is at most areas we get from our ponds, areas like that, and some only once a year in the fall typically, and sometimes now more in the next couple of weeks, late September until October, in that regard. So, and should mention too, Hoffman Park, we put a new kind of deck around the Octagon building, turned out
Yeah, I
really
saw
nice.
you guys out there. And
Yeah, that's right, Patricia, you were out there the other night, so, but take a look at that, that turned out really well, we brought the grade up, got rid of those kind of ugly has by the restroom facility, so a really nice deck patio, and then connected that sidewalk back to the baseball stadium. So that gravel that was there now is all in concrete. So some restoration work to do, but it turned out really well. So I just finished up yesterday.
So,
Well, we did have a tagger in the parks, kind of all summer long, and especially in the late summer here. And it is, everybody's knocking on wood, seems to be,
Found one of,
what do you mean by tagger?
well, it's a graffiti artist, but they call it tagging now.
Hmm.
It's not graffiti.
yeah, one person, there's probably almost 15 incidents, almost $20,000 of damage. When you add it all up.
And it was always a
Other one
bench.
is probably a couple $1,000s, but both are probably felony level. And they did find one person who's admitted to a recent series of events. So, but the one that kind of went all summer, June, July, early August, they have a suspect, but they've not, or suspects, but they've not yet identified the persons. But the other one they have, and charges are pending for that person.
I know Brian's always fighting with that down by the dams that and he goes, you know, if you just put roses and stuff, that's one thing. When you start using some of those words and some of those symbols, I'm gonna have to paint over it.
Were they from River Falls?
The one was a young gentleman from the Twin Cities area that's kind of been drifting through River Falls late summer. And then the others, I would tend to better probably middle school children. So,
Oh, geez.
Middle school, early high school appears to be the case.
Well, I met with Jason Shroud and his group out with regard to that blossom sculpture that's going to be put in. And I'm glad I did, because they kept seeing these open patches, like, for example, where the playground equipment was, and then there's this great big open, you know, there's that tree, and I'm like, no, oh, wouldn't this be good? I'm like, no, that's gonna be playground equipment. And they kind of like, well, what do you know? But they were all polite, but they kept finding, and I remember when we were doing the park, we were trying to be very intentional, not to, you know, just have this center, and we were trying to make it an experience where you go and you find things. I mean, how can you not find a baseball diamond? But I mean, it was purposely not that was all going to be around the pavilion. So I didn't want to, you know, I'm raining on their parade. So then I went, okay, and then I immediately sent Jason, I sent him, he had the very first one we had in the packet. So I sent him the 2017 one. I said, this is what we ended up with, and that we were intentionally trying to use the whole park. And so really, please do not put that thing right there in that center one. And he said, yeah, he agreed that either over in the one corner or over in the other corner would be best. But they're gonna let the artist, they're gonna give the artist several shots at what she wants and let her pick. So that was really interesting. I'm very glad I went.
Was it the one corner that Brenda had brought up by the bench that kind of overlooks the dam, that corner, and then like the opposite?
Yeah.
Where the sign is.
So what is she trying to do? If this is something you're in the park, you want to, and you find something, well, isn't this cool? Kind of tucked away in a corner and all this kind of stuff. But then there's also this could be a defining thing right there, right front and center. You come into Glen Park and there it is. They were talking about it being a picture moment. So you've had your wedding and stuff at the pavilion. You might want to use it for pictures. Well, then you don't want it in front of playground equipment. So we're talking about it. So anyway, they're going to let her decide which of the venues what she's trying to express. And I know that's real important when you're looking at art, for them to explain it, for you to understand what they're trying to do. Okay, so any other updates on park projects? Okay, action items. Focus River Falls Outdoor Recreation Plan Steering Committee. And I believe this is why we're looking at Stephanie.
That is why I am here. So I am calling in from Duluth. I'm up at the Minnesota Planning Conference, and I'm Emily, Sam, and Kendra are all up here. I've only seen Sam so far today, but I joked that I should find Kendra and make her join me from uh, from up here. But and then also Amy is not feeling well. She was planning to be with us this evening, but isn't feeling well. So appreciate the opportunity to still get together here and chat about the outdoor recreation plan. But feel free in this format to interrupt me, as we need to move through. When I go to share my screen, I won't be able to see you as well. So feel free to just interrupt as we go through here as well. But I will share my screen here and we'll bounce through a couple of different things. Whoops, you don't need to see my teams. I'll pull up the presentation here. For us to go through, I have added a reminder here, and I think I got the notice that we hit record. So just as a reminder here that our meetings are being recorded, but that was more a logistical thing to make sure we did hit the record button. But for our agenda, we'll go through and do our introductions as normal. We'll spend a fair amount of time chatting through kind of the update of where we're at with engagement and the results as they stand today, though the survey isn't closed. And then we will go through a workshop of some plan recommendations and getting some thoughts from all of you as we're reacting to the results that we've seen so far. I want to just touch quickly on the outline or content within the outdoor recreation plan and what we need to talk about and how we're formatting that, so you kind of have a understanding of where we're going and then hitting on our next steps to follow up. So from an introduction standpoint, and this will help me just to make sure I know who's all in the room, obviously name, and then wanting to know what your favorite fall or winter outdoor recreation activity is. And I will start just on my end, but I'm not a huge fan of winter, but I bring back horses are a good outdoor activity for me, but we have a lot of fun pulling the sled behind the horses. So just a little different than pulling behind a, ATV or something like that, but that is a fun activity. So maybe if I could turn it over to you, Mike, and could you work around the room and do introductions that way?
Sure. Again, Mike Stifter, Public Works Director. Cindy and I were talking about this question earlier today. I said watching football because I'm not a big outdoor winter person either, but fall hiking probably. I do enjoy that, getting out in the fall.
My name is Matt Jancourt. I do also enjoy fall hiking, but I like cross-country skiing in the winter.
I'm Brenda, the recreation assistant, and I also do not like cold outdoor weather, but my family enjoys some fall hikes. And last year we really enjoyed Whitetail Ridge, and there's instructions about going a certain way against the bikers, and then you step aside if there's a bike coming. So we did that, and it was beautiful.
Cindy Danke, I would say it used to be hunting. I don't hunt as much anymore for my fall activity because it was always cool to be out there. Still do a little bit, but not as much as I used to. And I'll be cynical and sarcastic and say I love shoveling.
I'm Ellen Massey. I'm the Management Analyst Fellow here with the city. And it's not an outdoor activity, but my favorite winter activity is curling.
You can explain that to us someday.
Oh, I would love to.
My name is Patricia LaRue, and I'm from Indianapolis where we didn't have ice skating. So I'm not an ice skater. I'm not a good ice skater. I simply, truly just go around in circles. But what I enjoy watching is the agility of the people who know how to ice skate. And them getting around everybody and going backwards and doing spins and stuff is just amazing. But for me, I just kind of go around in circles, and then the next day my back hurts. But it is fun to get out.
Brandon Dobberton, Park Board. I really like snow. I think it's beautiful. And one of my favorite outdoor activities is actually just going out and driving in it. Not in like a 4-wheel drive. You've seen my car. It's not that type of a setup. It's just like after a snow, it's just so quiet and peaceful. And nobody else, if you're lucky, nobody else is out there and they're your first tire tracks, to drive on the streets. So I just find it peaceful and it's one of the things I like to do.
Melissa Pedrini, Park Board, definitely like fall hiking. We just have a dog now, and so it's been fun taking her out. But I will say in the winter, I don't like to do a ton outside, but what I do like to do is watch my kids play outside because they love everything. They will stay out there. They'll just come in to like change into like dry, like I need dry stuff. And then they'll like take off and go back outside. They love everything. I can't get them to stay inside, so that's fun for me.
Natasha Schaefer, Park Board. I like to whip donuts.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought.
No, just kidding. I love everything about fall and winter. We do big pumpkin carving in the fall with my in-laws, and it's outside, right, because it's so messy and gross. And then I love to take the kids sledding, and we all reminisce about the good old days of Hoffman Park sledding up the big hill. So that's fun to watch the kids go sledding and build little jumps and my leg hurts.
Have you gone to Larson at all?
We haven't yet, no.
Oh, that's a nice.
That's what we've heard, yeah, so now that they're a little bit older, maybe we'll go over there and stuff this winter. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, let's keep going here on our agenda. And our item number 2 was a update on engagement and an overview of the results. So the last time we met was back in July. And so we've been doing a lot of engaging with the community in that time, and really focused in 3 areas. We had our 2 pop-up events over the last 2 Saturdays. So we had staff at Art on the Kinney with a station set up for a good 4-hour window there, kind of in the morning and into over the lunch hour. And then I had staff also last weekend at the flag football games. Set up there as well, and we talked to over 100 people through that process. I'll talk a little bit more about the results there. I think probably not a ton of surprise that we were able to engage with more people at Art on the Kinney than we were at the football game. We had people that would stop by and say hi, but wanted to make sure they were getting to their games and having some other activity. But we did get some good exposure as well, with people taking the flyer with the survey and some of those things. So those were 2 fun events for us as well. And then we do have the outdoor recreation needs survey that's open through Engage RF. It was opened at the end of August and will be closed. It's still open today, but we'll be closing that here next week. But we're over 267 responses as of this morning. So maybe more came in over the day, but getting some good response through the survey from that perspective as well. So we'll go through the results of what we've heard thus far, but the plan will be that we will put together the full summary that gives you the results of what everybody had to say once that survey is closed next week. And then I also wanted to note that we did have our stakeholder conversations. Those occurred back in July. I think we met on a Wednesday night, and then we had a day and a half of stakeholder conversations on Thursday and Friday. And one of those conversations was specifically on recreation, and we had a small but mighty group as part of that conversation, where we had some representation from a couple of youth sports organizations, some more personal or active recreation and natural resources, and then also some good representation from Grow to Share, who also brought some of that natural resources components as well. So it was a good, diverse conversation about the great things that we have going on in the community, and also what some of our different needs are as well. But that was a good conversation there as well. But wanted to kind of jump in and dive into the update on where we're at from a results standpoint, at least at this point. And so for the pop-up event, part of that is just getting out into the community, getting people, what is it that we're doing? How can you provide input? But we did have a couple of activities available. So if people wanted to spend a little bit more time with us, they could do so. And we had lots of good conversations with staff, like with the public at those events. Not everybody always participated, but it was a good conversation, especially at Art on the Kinney. We heard a lot of, oh, well, I've already taken the survey, so it was good to hear that we were, had some exposure with the people that were out at that event as well. But we had 2 specific activities that people could participate in person at the event, and what was really focused on what facilities are needed. What do we have today that we could use more of? And then what amenities should be considered that we don't, new amenities that we don't already have in place, were really where we focused our attention there. And just wanted to, at a high level, this activity mirrored the question that's in the survey. So we had just a few of the different activities that, when we went through the needs assessment back in July, were things that were, we wanted to get the public's input based on those needs assessment results. And so you can see the results here up on the screen. At the first column, we have where people identified that they would like to see more of that facility within a city-owned park. Middle column is where we'd like to see more available at publicly available locations, so with our schools and things like that, and then where we may have enough of something in a community. So it's interesting, you can see that from that dot exercise, at least and with Art on the Kinney and the football games, we had nobody say that we have too much or we have enough of anything in the community. And obviously we had lots more conversations than we ended up with dots, but the thing that really drew people to be active and participate on the board was that seasonal ice rink perspective. We did have a large smattering of dots when it came to that one as well. But generally here, majority, other than tennis courts where we had an even mix there at 3 and 3, that people would like to see more of everything we have listed within a city-owned park. And then we also had the ability for them to take a dot and identify what new amenities should be considered as we're thinking about the future of our parks. And so these, again, are the options that are mirrored in the survey as well. But we did have, some interest in all of the options that we had identified. Educational stations receiving the fewest marks there, but kayak launches getting support, nature viewing areas, natural playgrounds, sensory gardens, gardens supporting habitats. A general, support for the most part in everything that we had identified there.
People just put one dot on there, or?
They could put as many as they wanted. That was a, select all that apply type of activity. So, again, I think it's, not everybody, we had lots of good conversation, but, and I think a lot of times if people, and this is not uncommon for a pop-up event, if they've already participated on in the survey, they don't want to, double count themselves. So, that's why we maybe didn't see as many responses in things here as well. So, but we will have a full summary that comes out, but I wanted to just give you guys a heads up on kind of the base items that we had heard through the pop-up events. But now I will jump to the survey responses. And again, as I mentioned, we and I will try to make this as big as I can for you guys. This is the results as they were pulled this morning, but we will, once the survey closes next week, we will send out, updated responses for you to take a look at as well. But I will walk through here, so I'll try to pause as I'm working through the results, but please interrupt me if you have questions as well. So we won't spend a ton of time on these first couple questions, but we do have a couple of demographic questions in that survey to kind of just understand who is responding on the survey. And again, we had 267 responses here. So we did have somebody from every age group, only one person under the age of 18, but did have responses from every age group. The two biggest age groups are our 25 to 34 with 60 people responding, and then 104 respondents in the 35 to 44. But do see different results as we go, or there's responses from every age group in there. I will note that we can, once the survey is completed, we can go in and look and at how the one person under 18, or we wouldn't do that, but maybe the 23 people over the age of 65, how they responded to certain questions, we can go in and do that as well. So if there are areas where you'd like to know how a certain demographic responded, please let me know, because we can make sure to do that analysis as well. The one thing I will note, just so I don't forget, we did have paper copies of the survey available in a few different locations. I haven't connected with Kendra and Sam. I don't believe we've received any thus far, but we did make that available too if anybody, was at the library or things like that and wanted to participate on a paper copy. That was an option available to them as well. Then we also asked from a demographic question side of what is your relationship to the city of River Falls, and the majority there at 83.5% are residents. So we had a good respondents from our residents overall. And the second biggest group in our 15% are area or regional residents, maybe not living within the city, but in that general surrounding area. And then just a small smattering of that employed in the community, and or a frequent visitor from a recreation standpoint. And then we also asked as well, just from a usage standpoint, how frequently people are, the respondents visit parks within the community. And so, nearly 50% are at multiple times a week. So we've got some very active users of the system that responded. And then we jump to 22% of respondents a few times a month, 18% at once a week, and then we get down to once a month at 6%, and once every few months at 9%, and then only one person who's never visited a park. So, but we should maybe look at that person's responses and why. So again, I think, that's helpful information, for us. But again, thinking about if it would, as we're looking at some of the details of these questions, if it would be, helpful to understand, because it's great to know that we've got 44% that are active users, but, would it be interesting for us to know those that are, once a week or less, how they responded to things, could be, let us know there if there would be anything that's interesting to you, if that makes sense. Then we also added a question in here, and I don't think this was a question that was included in the survey that you were able to review, but Amy had requested at the last, just as we were about to launch, that we add a question about seasonality to the survey, which I think is a great idea, just kind of understanding what season people typically recreate outdoors, and then adding an open-ended question about specifically on winter activities. What would people like to see from a winter recreation standpoint? And so this question here, what season do you typically recreate? We had, the largest response, not surprising, is during our summer months, during our fall months, rating number 2, spring months coming in a little under fall, and then we go down to less than half of the respondents saying that they recreate outdoors during our winter months, which, based on just what we were saying about how we as a group recreate outdoors, kind of aligns there in that 50-50 split from that perspective. So just, another helpful context in terms of, when people are liking to get outdoors and things like that as well. But and then we had the open-ended question of what are some things that you would like to see from an outdoor recreation standpoint in the winter. We got a wide variety of responses, and some of them are not even recreation related, that they want more restaurants or things of things of that nature, a different form of recreation. But specifically, in the frame of recreation, a lot of the common things that you would expect to see popped up as ideas, whether it's like the, maintaining or improving some of our existing opportunities, whether that's our sledding hills or the, grooming of trails or things like that. Snowshoeing and skiing popping up there. But then also quite a few responses for skating rinks and different opportunities there. And then also a large number of people talking about wanting indoor recreation opportunities so they can move the things that they like to do during the summer indoors during the winter months. So nothing at this point, nothing, totally out of the box, kind of what you would expect there, but it's also helpful to just kind of understand, and get people thinking from that perspective as well. Then we start to get into the good questions here that help us to provide the context and I'll go through a little bit more of why we did this again here when I get through the slides. But again, remembering we have the quantitative assessment that we went through in July. Again, comparing River Falls to communities of similar sizes. How did we rank from that standpoint? And these questions that we developed were very specific to try to understand the public's perception of needs of some of those facilities. So this question here is, from their perspective, we wanted to know on some specific amenity types, whether we had enough of something in the community, whether we needed just more publicly available, or whether we specifically wanted them located within city-owned parks. So as I zoom in here to make sure it's more readable for everyone, our gray is where people identified that we have enough in the city. Our yellow are areas where they'd like to see more publicly available, and then our green is where we would like to see more in city-owned parks. They had only the option to choose one of the three for each facility type. So you couldn't select, the publicly available and city-owned. You had to choose one or the other. Any questions on just how this data is presented before we keep going through?
What is the difference between the publicly owned and then the city?
Yes. Yep. So that again is where it's, we have a lot of our courts and fields at a school, for example. So
Okay.
you could go use it, but it's not city owned or maintained.
I see. Okay.
Yep. And that is and I'm not sure who asked the question, but just a great reminder too about when we're thinking about outdoor recreation, specifically when we're responding to the requirements from the DNR, we need to be including everything that's publicly available, even if the city doesn't manage those. That needs to be part of our thought process. So
I have one quick question too. Was
Yeah.
that, I took the survey, so I should know this answer, but was that explained on the survey what the difference was? Did I miss that?
I believe so, but I would have to double check.
Okay.
We can look there. But I think the important part, in that too, because that is a great, kind of qualifier piece, is really when you look at this, you could almost look at it in two options of the gray versus the green and yellow combined, is really how I was starting to look at this as well. So, because I think the other hard part about it is, and we've had lots of chats about it too, that, there's programming that happens at school district facilities because the city doesn't have enough, and then people complain to the city about why the city isn't maintaining those fields. Well, they're not city fields, and so, even the public understanding what's publicly owned can be confusing at times too. So.
Can I ask you, does the city work with the owners of those public facilities to help? And I mean, is it just literally like, those are school district? I mean, is there a partnership there, any kind of help, assistance?
There's definitely with the school district,
Okay.
but not the university so much.
Yeah. And, from a standard perspective, when we're thinking, the university, they need to be publicly available in the sense of, that obviously not during school hours necessarily, but that if on a Saturday, I want to go use it and it's available to me at no cost versus some of the university facilities, you need to have, some form of membership or payment. We don't necessarily consider those publicly available either, if there's a payment that has to occur there too. Great questions. So yeah, then we can dig into the results here. And I think it's interesting to remember, again, we didn't have the massive responses as much smaller in the pop-up event, but we had nothing in the pop-up event where it was identified that we have enough. So just interesting, the different people, or depending on who responded and things like that. But from a baseball field perspective, and I'll group baseball and softball together here, we had 150, 145 people say that we have enough of those facilities, and then we're in the 90 range, where we would like to see more, whether regardless of location, but kind of grouping those together as well, 90 to 100 there. Our basketball courts gets us down to 111, where we feel like we have enough, but then seeing that there is a little desire for more there as well.
When I was answering these questions, being how I think, I also considered the cost. So you're kind of like, well, maybe we could use 4 more basketball courts, but I don't want to pay for 4 more basketball courts.
Sure.
So you guys can just go use the publicly available ones.
Yeah. Yeah, and Amy and I were reviewing these preliminary results earlier today, and it was a little surprising I was surprised to see the number of we have enough responses across here. And of course, we've had decent responses at almost 300, but it's a snapshot of 300 people, right? And then I'll group pickleball and tennis courts together just because they help to kind of think about. But, we've got 135 saying we have enough tennis courts and 119 with enough pickleball courts, and then seeing kind of the resulting there of wanting more at, 94, and I'm a planner, so doing math in my brain sometimes is hard. 114 wanting more pickleball courts. So at about a 50-50 split at pickleball courts from that perspective. So I'll zoom out here just so we can kind of see and we had picked a reminder of why we picked these 5 facilities was just that there were, as we were looking at that quantitative assessment, and I'll go through that again to kind of remind us and ground us. These were areas where we maybe needed more. The results were either showing that we needed more or that we maybe had enough, but we were hearing from the public that maybe that wasn't the case. And so we kind of wanted to ask that same question. So I think the interesting part is that basketball and pickleball are the 2 where we're about that 50-50 split, but our baseball, softball, and tennis courts, we had a slight majority that say we have enough from that perspective.
Stephanie, to make sure I'm understanding this right, the yellow would represent, people would be saying, we need more pickleball courts at public places school, like at the schools and the university.
Yep.
I would think they would be, I would think they'd want the city owned. I mean, if you're a city resident and you're saying, I think we need more pickleball courts, I would think you would be voting for.
Students though, maybe students are.
Okay.
Well, but maybe, maybe a lot of people answered like Patricia going, well, it's not that I don't, I think we have enough. I don't really, as a city resident, want to pay for it,
Yeah.
Or we didn't know which
Right.
one we were picking
Yeah.
and why.
Yeah.
We just said, yes, we need more. Let's pick this one.
Yeah, and whether that's, and the other part of it is the city-owned park versus it's maybe, I don't know that we're gonna put a, pickleball court in the front yard of City Hall, but there are other city facilities too that maybe people were thinking about. It's, hard to get in the brain of exactly how people would respond, but, and that's why I think.
It could tell you that a lot of people don't play baseball, softball that took the survey or play pickleball or tennis also,
Yeah. Yes.
on this question.
For sure. And I think, there's a question, I don't have all of the written responses here that in this version, but when there is the question later on about what we have too much of, and there were quite a few comments about that too much organized sports or, too many court, fields or courts, part of that coming down to too many, courts or fields that aren't maintained, to a status that the respondent would like. But I think we did see a little bit more, or there is a little bit of a trend in that too. So I think, Cindy, that's a great point that it all depends on who these 300 people are. So, okay, well, I'll keep us moving here then to, this was, the question was framed in the exact same way, the same three options, but was targeting some of the facilities that we either have or amenities that we have a small number of, or have none of in the community, and were things that we either, wanted to ask, ice rinks, we wanted to, have that public feedback to, base some decisions off of. Lacrosse, where we have none, but compared to other communities, we show that we're deficient. We should have lacrosse, and just kind of getting that understanding there as well. So I'll zoom in here and then go scale back out again. But, out of everything we asked, seasonal ice rinks, 40 people, we have enough. But there, is a desire there for more publicly available ice rinks within the community. From a seasonal perspective, I don't think that was terribly surprising to see. But I did think, and you can also tell the number of, they weren't required to respond to every single amenity. So you can see here the total number of people that responded to lacrosse was, fewer than the others. So just something to be mindful of. But of the people that responded, we had 3 more people that said we need lacrosse at either a school or city-owned park compared to the 105, so 107 to 105. So kind of a 50-50 mix there. Splash pad, this one was interesting to me, just our work in other communities, we hear all the time, splash pads, splash pads, splash pads, we need more splash pads. So this one was interesting to me, where we came out with a slight majority on the we have enough with the one in the community. That was interesting to me. And then disc golf as well with our 2 courses. This was a surprising result to Amy, just in terms of the need that we're hearing from the disc golf community. I think the other piece that's helpful for us to think too is we do have, had 83% of our respondents are community residents. And so, is disc there, some of that need might be more from a tourism, or visitor type draw, and less from a, I remember in college, I had friends that would drive all over the place to go to different disc golf courses and things of that nature. So We only had the 4 that we looked at there, but you can kind of see the differing results, as they build throughout. Any comments, questions with those results?
It would be, go ahead.
It's just funny that one is winter and the rest are
Yeah.
not, but but anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
It would also be interesting to know if we could have put like do you use or would you use these
Sure.
things?
Mhm.
Because especially with the splash pad, like do 138 of you actually go there when it's bit like to see that that's not another need, or do you ever use the disc golf to know that? So it'd be interesting to know that.
And I think the one piece that was also interesting for me, and we're generalizing here, but the majority of our respondents fell in that 25 to 40 age group, which is generally our, the age where you have young children. And so there, I thought that was interesting from the splash pad perspective, but then also when we're thinking about some of those organized sports facilities, too. It's not that we had a large number of our senior community. That wasn't the overwhelming demographic there as well. Then I'll keep us moving here. We had we included a specific question about the community or recreation center, which of course is not, under the definition of outdoor recreation in the one sense of the plan, but wanted to make sure when we're thinking broadly about recreation that we're, including everything that we would want to. So here it was trying to look at, and understand, we didn't want to ask the simple question of, do you want a community center? Because we think we already know the answer to that. But if we were able to, have a community center, what would you like to see in that community center? And of course, indoor pool was the top response here in green at 231 responses. Our second was indoor gym space. We heard a lot of this, and this was a very common, or it was a common conversation as part of the stakeholder conversations as well, particularly with those representing organized sports. Then we had workout equipment here at 163, followed by community gathering spaces. So it was, this was a little bit of a theme that we have been hearing too on kind of that social component of recreation. Then we have our locker rooms kind of teamed with that workout equipment, and classrooms down here at 81 responses.
What was it, green? Classrooms?
The pool.
The little,
Other.
oh.
Yeah. So just some other little, more specific, they align in these different, those responses align in these different buckets, but they, are some more specific, basketball courts versus just indoor gym space, those types of responses. So, then we had, what other types of park amenities or design features would you like to see? So here's where, we had talked about some of the different, different amenities. We had you guys design parks and things like that. What are some different options that we could be thinking about? And had thrown out a few different opportunities here. So our number one, I'll maybe just go in order so it's a little bit easier to follow, but 123 people supported natural playgrounds where we have, natural plants growing, no fixed play structures, kind of a different form of play structure. The largest support at 141 for all abilities playgrounds, so with amenities for everyone to have access. There were a fair amount of comments when we get into question what we had too little of in terms of accessibility and having equipment and facilities that are accessible to all. So I think kind of aligning there. Sensory gardens was here with 98. Nature viewing areas at 112 in the pink. This smaller blue here at 77 was educational stations, opportunities to learn. Our gardens with 121 responses, and then kayak launches coming in number 2 here as well. So some good support, a couple of them dropping off, but I think the that mimicked the pop-up event responses that we had received as well. And then 24 is other there as well. And so we did also have a couple of open-ended questions that I'll just kind of summarize quickly in terms of what do we have too much of. This was also interesting because we got a lot of things that weren't outdoor recreation specific, but I already mentioned that some of the fields and courts were mentioned. There was a very small percentage of talking about the number of playgrounds that we have throughout the community, but there was lots of discussion of less alcohol related things, less bars, those kinds of things. So not recreation related was actually where a majority of that came from. There were also a lot of comments about we don't have too much of anything. It's hard to say if there's anything that we have too much of there as well. And then we also asked about what there is too little of within the community. And there's the things that are, I think were important to kind of mention here would be were a fair number of mentions about the different park amenities, wanting more restrooms, whether that's, porta potties or, permanent restrooms, more gathering spaces, whether that's our shelters or picnic tables, places to gather within our parks, those types of things. So we did hear, a broad variety of those different types of amenities that they'd like to see have access to more of those things. There are comments about, some of our winter sports and ice skating and things. The wanting to have, more kayaking, canoe places. There was a lot of comments too about our trail network and our sidewalks and the connectivity to our park system. So the ability to walk to a park, things of that nature. Did I lose you guys?
No.
Oh, okay. The camera turned off for you, so I just wanted to make sure you were still. Okay. So then I'll keep going. Then question 13 was how accessible do the current outdoor recreation offerings feel to you? So we had very inaccessible in pink. So we did have a couple people feel like they can't access the offerings that their family unit wants to use. We had some at inaccessible at 37 people responded that there are some barriers that they have to overcome. Majority at almost 60% having no barriers, and 25% as very accessible. They have open access to all of the offerings that they themselves and their family would like to use. So I think there is a 15% of those respondents in that inaccessible or very inaccessible area there as well. But we did have some written comments that kind of echoed this as well.
Do we have any ideas what the barriers were? Like why they were not accessible?
I don't have access to that at this point, but we will, if they did write anything in, we'll make sure that that's in the full response. I just don't have access to that right now.
I know one of them is going down below the dam and watching the waterfalls and stuff. You can't get down there unless you're pretty healthy. And you wouldn't want to go down there if you've got bad knees or if you've got a small child. But I know that's just one.
Yeah. Okay. Then question 14 was getting into specifically our playgrounds, and that's a key feature that we have, especially in our neighborhood parks, is that playground and thinking about accessibility. So we were, asking questions about what they would like to see more of within those playgrounds. And so we have sensory play features here at just under 100. Infant swings, so being a little specific in terms of what we have there. We've got lots of swings, but just the different types. And then also ADA accessible swings. So whether that's, where a wheelchair can roll on, or there's, some of those different accessibility types. We, included that rubber turf that just provides, anybody with mobility challenges it's better than areas that have, mulch or otherwise. But the winner here is more on adult recreation features. So kind of that fitness trail was used as an example where there's equipment that's available for adults to participate in addition to children as well.
Yeah.
We also asked a question about how you get your preferred mode of transportation to get to your outdoor recreation destination. So how people would, like to move. And this was just helpful for us to understand, when we're thinking about parking or, trail access or things of that nature. So, kind of a little bit of a split here, with driving at 45%, walking or biking or walking or rolling at 90 or 38, almost 40%, and 15% with biking. So just kind of some context there as well. I guess understand. So that, just in kind of summary there again, is where we're sitting with survey results. Again, we will be keeping that survey open for another week here. So if if you have groups that you want to shoot an email to, make sure people know that is still available. There have been social media posts. There was a newsletter that went out to engage RF folks and things as well. So just, anything, it's open for another week. So if we can get more responses, that would be great. So then I wanted to move us into kind of stopping me from talking and getting you guys thinking. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation here and chat about the recommendations workshop. And we know that we don't have all of the results here, so we didn't want to put the cart too far in front of the horse, but really starting to get you guys thinking and get your thoughts about what type of amenities we want to see based on the input that we received, and then thinking back to kind of the needs assessment workshop as well. So these are the slides that we had gone through at our last meeting, but I just kind of wanted to remind us of what those results had laid out. So kind of as a reminder here, this was that quantitative assessment where we have a metric of, based on an average of communities of our size, how many of the different facilities publicly available facilities should we have, and then whether we are deficient or have a surplus of those things. So again, I won't go into these in the same level of detail that we did at our last meeting, but just as a reminder, soccer fields, based on those metrics, we've got enough soccer fields in the community, which is another reason why we didn't ask that question. But from a softball and baseball perspective, those metrics are showing that at least in our city parks, we have a deficiency. And again, that's city parks versus our public surplus, includes all of our schools and things. We're still doing okay as a community moving forward. Football fields, sitting well, just like soccer fields. From a court sports and play equipment standpoint, our sand volleyball courts, we're doing okay. Play structures, we're doing well on, but it was our basketball courts and our tennis courts again, which is why we wanted to ask that question from the public, is where we see that deficiency between what's available in a city-owned park versus publicly available. Again, those university tennis courts really swaying that where we have that bigger number there as well as the public schools. And then we also had some of our other miscellaneous activities. So, and everything was showing as, a deficiency here by 2045 from our pool and skateboard parks, ice rinks, and community gardens there as well. So showing that those were all things that we would like to see more of, or that we'd like to see more of, that the assessment shows that we should be thinking about. I won't go into detail here, but again, these were things that we didn't have, we currently don't have within the community, but there is a metric for how many we should have of those things. So technically be that we are deficient in these. As we reviewed this the last time, lacrosse fields was the one where we wanted to get that input on as well. And then just as a reminder here as well, these are areas where we don't have a NRPA metric to use to to have that quantitative assessment. But as we were looking through here as well, we had asked about the splash pad and the pickleball courts and the disc golf in terms of the number of courses versus the number of pins. But areas that do we have enough of those things? I think we also had some input that from an event space or gathering space, we wanted to see more opportunities. There was also some comments on kind of that fishing area, that type of recreation as well. So that was a very quick summary, but just kind of wanted to remind us there as well. So now I want to get you guys thinking here as well, and kind of this workshop thinking through one of the main outcomes that we need to have out of this are, what are our recommendations? What do we want to see from a action perspective, whether that's the construction of new amenities, improving something that we have to provide different, different services? What policy changes do we need to make? And maybe do we need to make some changes to how we're maintaining or operating things? So we will be doing more work on our end, but wanted to, give you all the opportunity in hearing remembering where we're sitting from a quantitative assessment, hearing where we're coming from a qualitative perspective. What are those things that you'd really like to see put into the plan for future action in the next 5, 10, 20 years for River Falls? So to kind of help frame that conversation, we were trying to think of, new facilities. Whether we are adding more of something or, bringing in sensory gardens or something, what additional facilities do we want to see? Do we want more pickleball courts within the community? And then also from a facility improvement perspective, so maybe these are things that we already have. We feel like we have enough of them, but we maybe need to improve what we have. So maybe that's, upgrades to our shelters or reservation spaces. We had comments from the community about the importance of wanting to gather socially. So would there be improvements that we could do to those things as well? Then there's also thinking in the frame of policy changes. So that's maybe not something that would be, an immediate action, but would be something when we're working down the road that we think about, would influence the decisions that's made. And so, an example of that might be that we include, all abilities equipment at all new playgrounds, that's just standard practice, that there are all abilities swings or something at least at every playground that gets constructed in the future. And then finally, thinking about things from a maintenance and operations standpoint, and some of that comes down to access and things. Do we need, we think about changes to our plowing process or requirements to improve accessibility or things like that. So this is really the framework of the types of activities that we will be working through this process. So this is where we wanted to have I'll go through one more slide here before we move to discussion. But any questions on the type of actions or activities that we want to be thinking about here?
Well, I wish we would have had this kind of an explanation before we got
Sure.
that, because what I did do my homework, and what I wrote down does not fit the top,
Okay.
what you've got there. So, I mean, it's way off base. So now I got
Sure.
a fresh think.
Yes, well, and of course, we'll take any of your, I don't know, Patricia, exactly, what you were thinking of, but what other ideas you have, please share, because they might fit into one of these buckets in a different way than maybe I've described. So please don't, not share things from that perspective as well. Would you guys mind turning your camera back on just so I can see you guys?
We tried and it didn't work.
Oh, okay.
Three dots on your picture.
What, on next on the more?
Like, look where Brenda is.
Okay.
Those three
Well,
dots.
okay.
Is that too?
Okay.
When we can see the camera button has a line through it, like it's turned off, but nothing happens.
Okay.
Hold on for a minute.
It won't turn on.
Okay. That's okay. I'll continue to go
All
ahead
right.
and just please interrupt me as I go.
Anyone else know? Yeah, that'll go away in a second. At least it did before.
Well, I can keep.
Turned off at like right at an hour. I don't know if there was like a time limit on it or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was my thought too. It seemed like it turned off at 6:11.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to touch that again.
Okay. And that's okay. I think that the other piece that I wanted to have us be thinking about here is just the different types of recreation amenities or areas that we might be thinking about. So thinking in terms of, our organized sports or our fields and courts, our playground equipment, that park infrastructure, again, in terms of our shelters, our benches, our restrooms, our lighting. And then also the kind of active, more personal or group active recreation, whether that's kayaking, community gardening, fishing, hiking, those types of activities. And then also that social recreation component as well. So, just kind of reminding us that we're not just talking about organized sports and our playgrounds. We're thinking about all of those different components in there as well. And I think we can't forget that kind of that natural environment can fit into a lot of these different components in terms of how our natural resources fit into our recreation as well. So with that, I'm going to jump to a different screen here, and I, again, thank you, Patricia, and others who, were thinking about this process and having some ideas. My thought here was, turn it over to you guys again. No idea is a bad idea, but I can fill things in as they fit with the here, or we can add other ideas. But the thought here, is just throwing out those ideas. What are those actions that you would like us to consider as we move forward in this process and close out that qualitative engagement activity?
Every time when you see something first, like new facilities, I feel like that's more important, but to me, the more important thing is improving the facilities that we have. That's just what, what I see. So sometimes when you got it on the top, it looks like, oh, we're supposed to be, that's our most important thing to think about, but, so it's to improve some of the facilities that we already have is extremely important. And looking at some of the survey things, like more gathering spaces, it came up quite high in both places. So, so that to me seemed a little bit more, I was surprised on the kayak launching on both of those, I guess, because I was like, wow. So that kind of surprised me, and I don't know if it was in the reference because it was in that mix that kayak was in. I can't quite remember, but I was thinking, really, kayak is more important than Yeah, to people than the sensory garden and gathering place, you know, so it was just.
I had a couple ideas on ways maybe to improve facilities. These aren't things that I personally feel, but I've seen at other parks and maybe could be added to parks long-term, just throwing it out there. I saw a thing last night on KARE 11 on an RC car course.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super inexpensive dirt with plastic and the kids were out. It's just like a track that they can drive their like remote controlled cars on. Looked pretty cool. KARE 11, check it out. Maybe it could be added to a place, kids outside. And they're into that kind of stuff. And
They
then,
bring their own cars?
yes,
Okay.
and it's maintained by the people who use the course.
Okay.
So right up River Falls is kind of.
Absolutely.
I would love that.
And then like an archery range at Hoffman against that ridge, I've seen that done at parks. You know, clearly you'd have to have an area where, you know, there's no trails and stuff, but they just have practice sites there that, you know, people are gearing up to go hunting.
I think there's a police policy on airborne.
Is there?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that
Yeah.
in part, like in the city of
Yeah.
Eagan, they have a practice
Yeah.
facility.
Well, I'll tell you how I approached this with no understanding of what I was supposed to do. I kind of more focused on the investment. So when I was thinking what would draw people to downtown River Falls versus out at Whitetail or out at the ballparks. So, and I'm gonna stay consistent with my Kenny Corridor Committee background, but I thought we were gonna take this 1, 2, 3. So at 5 years, we have a plan to invest in what used to be Lake Louise and to develop that into an area of nature trails and that type of thing. Again, you're just about, 4 blocks from downtown. In 10 years, this goes kind of with the kayaking. I had Lake George having it we'd have to dredge it, but having a fountain and some bubblers in there, that would help the fishermen. If you could improve the fishing in Lake George, now you've got people fishing a block from downtown and going in and maybe having a cocktail afterwards. And then also the same with kayakers coming down from the north, instead of getting in south of River Falls and heading to Hudson or Prescott or Stillwater, that they get in north and come down. Then you could have instead of your kayak launches, have your kayak takeouts, and on White Trail or whatever, have a place where they could then again store their stuff, go downtown, have a meal, and invest in the community. And then this still is my Kenny Corridor thing. We have these trestle bridges. We have trestles in town when we used to have a train. And there's this beautiful plan to connect a bridge on these trestle bridge and just make this whole circular type thing where you go have an ice cream cone or, so those are that's kind of, I got my brain focused on the wrong things. And then I saw you're like going, this doesn't fit any of these. But I did kind of focus on bringing people to downtown River Falls and spending money.
Sure.
It does, it improves the facility, which is obviously our trail system.
Well, that's true.
But-
Yeah.
And the fishing and the kayaking.
Right.
So Patricia, I think, and that's why I said it's not that you didn't do anything wrong from that standpoint, because these are definitely things that, fit within, and there were lots of comments about, connectivity and trails and things. So from a 5-year perspective, I put the Lake Louise, trails and nature area there under new facilities, and then had put the improved fishing and kayaking under improved facilities under this active recreation piece. So those make sense. Did you have any other, did I miss anything, or were those the 3 ideas that you had?
No, I think I would focus on investment, creating activities So we have Whitetail that can bring in bikers, and they have a couple tournaments that they can bring in 2,000 people, but they don't come into River Falls. And, you know, there's a lot of things I know, you can't do disc golf in downtown River Falls, but what you can do, you know, walking, enjoying a fountain, whatever, because I'm older, I wouldn't be doing those other things anyway. But, yeah, to just bring the people to have activities downtown, winter, summer, and fall, so that we're not having everything on the outskirts of our town and people get on the interstate or highway, come in, play baseball, and then get back and leave, you know?
Yep. Nope, and I think that's, you know, I added that here to a policy change, you know, kind of discussion where we're thinking about our investments in recreation that bring people and money to River Falls was how I summarized that there too. So that, you know, that is a good kind of policy change perspective about thinking about, you know, where, you know, investment A over investment B and some of that. So I think that's another great concept.
If basketball courts brought people into downtown River Falls, I would have said we don't have enough of them.
Well, and if you think about it too, then we would have to, how do you bring them into downtown? People need to eat, we need to, you know, so we could, like, collaboration too about how do you get people who are in those outskirts to come downtown?
Well, we
Because
talked about Cork, you'd have to register someplace downtown. So people would have to come in to register, but it's like that's asking them to do too much and they're a volunteer group. But yeah, that type of thing, or give them coupons. Come downtown and, you know, take in a free movie.
yeah, but so some of the things you said made me think too, though, as far as like, you know, kayak takeout. I know my husband and his work, they are in Red Wing and they came to River Falls to kayak for a work event, and they got out right at Bikes and Brews on the path right there, so like improving that area, because then they went to Bikes and Brews and they got food, and then they went to get ice cream, and then they went and walked the path some more. So I mean, I definitely like the idea of improving the takeout or put in areas that could bring you a little bit further down on the path, and then maintenance of like the maintaining the white pathway and things like that for winter things. Are we gonna be able to get the horse and carriage rides again for?
River Dazzle?
River Dazzle.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. So like, you know, maintaining those paths and things like that so that we could have different opportunities that bring people downtown. But then also we have those paths and those put in takeout areas or whatever that are more improved so that you want to be downtown. Just enough. And then my other definite either new or improve is definitely ADA accessible, whether that's playground equipment or the pour and play. Even my kids, when they went on the new Greenville or Glen Park, were like, it's so squishy. And we were jumping on it, you know, so that brings the kid, they feel a little bit safer. I feel safer as a parent with that. I don't know, I'm sure it is safer. I don't care if it is or not, it feels safer.
Well, there especially, it was, you know, because the kids were wet from the splash pad, and when they went over there. And when I took my granddaughter, before it was there, then we went, oh, no, we're not gonna play on this right now.
Right.
We're gonna come back and play later, because I didn't want her all sandy hidden in the car after she was wet. So.
But one of the things I said in my survey was that, you know, we might have enough slides and swings and stuff that are kind of ADA-esque accessible, but getting onto them.
Right, absolutely.
If you have a child or an adult who has any sort of mobility concerns, walking on an uneven surface is so cumbersome. So I bet that's a lot of what people were thinking when they were saying it's, you know, slightly inaccessible. Yeah, once I can get my child there, get my adult on that equipment, then I can use it, but getting to it, whether that's parking, walking to it, and then physically getting on it. So I don't know if that means improvement with what we already have, or if that counts as new, but.
No, I mean, yeah, that could kind of go in a couple, you know, maybe I'll move these to in between. like I did spaces to recreate. There we go.
Well, one need I've noticed in town recently is both at the pickleball courts, they're playing, now that it gets darker earlier, the guys have set up their own lights at the pickleball court, and I play tennis at the middle school with my kids, and it gets dark early, and I don't know what this would look like, but having lights during these seasons that, max out at a certain time, but could be controlled by people who show up to play, I think that would be great. And that sort of leads to like a policy thing maybe, as far as a lot of these amenities in the town are the public ones owned by the schools. But, as a community member, it's like, and we're as a city, we're sort of claiming that there's these spaces for community members. But if there was a partnership, because that school one, for example, like people use it and I would go there, but I don't think the school district has any interest in putting lights there because they don't need lights at their courts because they're viewing them for a school thing. But if this city had that kind of like agreement of like, well, these are really important to the community members as well, we'd like to maybe think about improving some of these, like putting lights there, if they have this partnership with the schools or something.
Yeah, and I wonder if that would improve and be beneficial to a lot of our organized sports, which we have too much of. But as an organized sport coach, when we practice from like 6 to 7, and in about a week here, we're gonna have to move it to like, can you be there by 5:45 to 6:45, because eventually it's too dark to do anything, or safety wise, like we could do some stuff, but so that would be.
And I think it would benefit the school too. I don't think they look at it, as a great need, but they could have some of their tennis matches that go a little bit later, if there were lights on there, and they wouldn't have to be rushing, getting kids out of school, a class to get to someplace because it could go later because there were lights.
Definitely at the high school, middle school.
Yeah.
Did there used to be, I feel like my husband said on campus, there used to be like a light timer that you could like turn on.
And I think that was on the tennis and the basketball courts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say where the childcare center is now, there used to be.
Yep, used to be the basketball, yeah.
Even if you had to put quarters in it,
I mean.
I'll pay for it.
Can I just ask the city folks about that, like the retention pond at Hoffman, is that thing, that seems like a huge space, is it like, I know it floods periodically, but yeah, like as I think lacrosse was an issue, and I don't even know what a lacrosse field looks like, but for the most part, like especially these last couple of years, that thing's dry and good looking, flat.
That's where we started football. We started football and then we got soccer, and then we got flooded out one year, and then they chose to not really, spend a lot of money and time in that and looked for other places to be able to have it. But no, it's definitely, it's sort of an unused at times.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people ask, why don't you guys use that for anything?
When it's good, it's good, but when it's bad.
I mean, something really bad.
You can, but
Yeah.
can you get flooded out? And so there goes,
Yeah, I mean, that actually, so you use functionality of it, if you have things on it, because you compact it and grow the soil in there, that's no longer permeable.
I think there's something to be said for green space. I mean, anytime I drive by it, it's just nice where can you see a large open space, whether it has football, lines painted on it, or there's a baseball field in it, but just to see this untouched large piece of property, although it may be, a pain to mow and upkeep, but it's nice to see that because you're not gonna see that anyplace else in the city.
It's really fun when it floods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I took pictures this last spring of people swimming down there, and I'm like,
Gross.
I know. And rugby, a college rugby team comes and uses it in the springtime, and if there's snow there, they spray on top of the snow. I think they prefer the snow than the wet or whatever. But they come it's every year they come, and you see people golfing, although they're not supposed to, or practicing their golf shots. You see fly fishermen down there. I saw remote control, it's really,
Melissa
On
just,
height, but
Melissa just brought up a good point that a skating rink, because you wouldn't get flooded out because the skating rink would be gone by the time floods were coming through.
Excellent. Well, great.
well, you gotta keep away from the sledding now, come on, people.
It's really fun. Slide down on shoot across.
Well, I think this was a really good discussion, and I don't want to, I mean, I think we can continue the conversation. I think what we'll end up doing here, as well as reformatting this is obviously a virtual whiteboard type format, but putting together these thoughts, and when we send out the updated results from the community survey, we'll send this out for you as well. So be thinking, Patricia, another opportunity there for you as well to kind of think in this frame again. So we'll have some more follow-up work that would, if you have any other ideas, you'll have another opportunity to share with us through when those final survey results come out there as well. So, but that is really our next, kind of the continued step for us in the process here is does the assessment from both the qualitative and quantitative side translate into those recommendations and implementation. So the last last two items on our agenda here are a little bit more of quick hitters, but wanted to we are at the process here in the kind of the tail end where we've already started to work on kind of the content, some of the content within the outdoor recreation plan. So we wanted to hit on this a little bit, and we met last week with the comp plan steering committee and kind of chatted about this at the same level. But really what we're trying to do across all of these three plans is make sure that they are concise. They have enough information where you can understand, but they are also concise where they're not overwhelming documents. And that, so I'll use the needs assessment area for an example. There's a lot of data that went into that. We're not going to have pages upon pages of tables and narrative that get into the nuts and bolts of what that needs assessment is how we came to those solutions. We'll have a technical memorandum that summarizes that activity, but then the plan document itself will be, what are those really salient points that we need to make sure that people understand and can get across? So trying to be really thoughtful about the content that's going into the plan so that it's understandable by, you as a decision-making body, the city or the common council, but that it's also something that your neighbor can pick up and take a look at as well. So here I just have outlined, will kind of end up being the order of things within the plan. But just as a reminder too, we do have some components that need to be in here to make sure that we're responding to the DNR's requirement for that comprehensive outdoor recreation plan and make sure we're eligible for grant funds. And so that, we'll have obviously an introduction. What is this plan? How was it developed? Things of that nature. We do need to have a discussion of the planning region. And this is an area where our hands are a little tied from the DNR. They have some specific components that they want us to talk about to be within the plan. But then, of course, this also is tied to our the community profile that we have already developed and reviewed as kind of that base information. We'll of course have our goals that we've identified through this process, and then getting into our existing inventory. So this is a great we're being very thoughtful in how we want to put this inventory together as well. Again, this is a plan that has both a 5-year and 20-year horizon. So we want to have enough information in that inventory that you can understand where we're going, but we also don't want it to be set up in a way that, we start implementing things and you have more pickleball courts or, changes happen in a park that you're constantly having to update this plan. So being very thoughtful in how that is put together, or if however we're putting it together, that it is something that's easy for staff to update as needed as well. And then of course we need to highlight the results of our needs assessment in both that qualitative and quantitative information, and then how that translates into the recommendations we'd like to see. And this is a key part for us in terms of that 5-year planning horizon and that 20-year planning horizon that we're thinking about recommendations for both, and then how that translates specifically into implementation. It's great for us to say we want all of these activities, but then the implementation plan will then focus about how we're going to get it done. So there will be some things probably in that implementation frame that also translate into the comprehensive plan and back and forth. So more to come from that side as well. But that was very high level, but just wanted to get you thinking about what we're including within the plan, how it's starting to be organized. But any general questions on that outline?
On the comprehensive plan, are they looking more like at a community center? I mean, has that been brought up within that? Because I know that we're dealing with just outdoor recreation, but obviously it comes up a lot.
Yes, and that has been a discussion in the recreation space, but is definitely something that it's a hard thing about, what we're able to achieve as far as a community center, but I have a feeling it's going to end up in both plans from that perspective. The one thing that yes, it's more indoor in this outdoor recreation plan, but just because of the grant funds and grant eligibility of this plan, I want to make sure that it's included in this plan as well. Just because there could be, you never know, down the road somebody said, I can pay for 90% of the community center. I need the city to fund the remaining 10%. Well, let's go get a grant, for that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah. When I win the lottery, yep.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. When I win the lottery and build you guys a community center, we can go from there. Perfect. So then just what happens next, kind of where we're headed with things here in kind of the final phases. So we'll get that survey closed here within the next week. We'll then kind of be confirming on the plan recommendations piece, so give you guys another opportunity to, put out any thoughts or ideas. And the plan is for us to not have an October meeting, but we will have some information rolled out to you on kind of where we're headed from those plan recommendations and give you something to noodle on, but not a formal presentation. And then we'll continue the drafting of the plan. And our intent is that our November meeting, we will have a draft plan before, out to you before that November meeting for us to chat and work through all of the recommendations from that standpoint. Just as an update with the other plans as well, the bike and pedestrian plan is on a similar timeline. They have a meeting, their next meeting is the first Wednesday in October. I can't remember what date that is off the top of my head. But they're kind of on that same timeline with the intent that we take these plans to the Planning Commission for them to review and make sure that they are aligning with the comprehensive plan. But all 3 plans would go through adoption with the city council in March of next year. So we're really looking at the outdoor recreation plan work and the bike and pedestrian plan work wrapping up within this calendar year, and then allowing us to focus on the comp plan, that review process carrying into 2023. So the intent there, just as a heads up so you're all aware too, January of 2023 for the comprehensive plan will be internal review and steering committee review. So review of city staff and the steering committee. February will be our public review, where we'll have another public meeting and additional opportunities to engage on the comprehensive plan and these plans as well. And then it would go through plan commission and common council in March for adoption is where we're at from a timeline perspective. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions, but do appreciate your time and your flexibility with my virtual presence here today, but really appreciate all of your work and input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will say one thing, that those focus groups that they had with the community gardens, we haven't really talked a lot about it here, but those people are very, very passionate. And I think that they could get behind a really nice plan if we could set aside some different areas for them.
Sure. Excellent.
What's the social for tonight up there at the?
Yeah, so I'm missing the actually SRF sponsored social event right now. It's dinner and then so I'll get there. It goes until 8 o'clock, so I've got an hour to use my drink tickets.
Stephanie, we have a council member here in town, in the room that has a question. Did you say?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sean Downing?
Is there any specific place that a person, if they have a safety concern, can put on the survey or connect with the city?
There isn't a safety concern question within the survey, but the obviously there's, if they want to reach out to Amy, otherwise there's contact information on the Engage RF and the website, or there's a open comment form on Engage RF as well, but there were no specific safety questions on the survey.
And how do you get to that form? I haven't seen that.
Not off the top of my head, but
Okay.
I can get instructions to you. I would have to look. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Excellent. Well, I thank you all, and we'll see y'all soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, so with that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.